There we go.
Obviously, Jen, can you do that?
I started the recording. What did you ask if I could do? Sorry.
To make Rob a co-host.
Yes, I sure can. Thank you. All right. There we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Perfect.
over to you.
All right. Thank you. So
Great.
I'm just getting my bearings for a second here still. Yeah. So I got okay, so opening. Rob, would you like to do that or would you like me to do that?
Sure, I can do that. Hello,
Thank you.
everyone. Welcome. And while we're waiting for people to join, it is top of the hour. I'm imagining that many of you have been participating in several sessions and that you may have been seated for a while. We're all in different time zones, so just pay attention to what's alive for you right now. Are you feeling some tension in your body? Are you feeling some fatigue? And to pay attention to that. And if you need to stretch or if you need to get up or move around, if you've been sitting for a while, before we start, now's an opportunity just to move your body if that speaks to you, or to change positions if that would be relaxing or comforting. And after we do that, we'll get started. So it's my honor and my privilege to be invited to speak to you about observation today. So I'll talk more about the pathways to liberation matrix and the role it's played in my practice. But for those of you who are familiar with the matrix, observation is one of the fundamental skills at the very beginning of the matrix with presence. So being present to what is offered in our lives and noticing. And so the title of my presentation is Noticing, a fundamental skill for everything else. And what we'll be talking about is how do you do that? So we talk a lot about the distinction between observation and evaluation or judgment or diagnosis. But it's not often talked about it in terms of, well, how do you cultivate that skill? And so since we're talking about the matrix as an assessment of those skills, I thought it would make sense to talk about, well, how do you make progress in developing that skill of observation? But before we go further with that, let me talk a little bit about this session and what it's designed to do. So this session is meant to relate to the skills of the Pathways to Liberation Matrix that was developed by Jory Mansky, Jake Gottwals, Jack Lehman, and Jim Mansky. And the purpose of the matrix is as a support for your practice in developing the skills underlying living compassionately and nonviolently. And this talk is in service of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, CNBC, an organization that was started by Marshall Rosenberg more than 35 years ago. And because of the effects of the global pandemic, CNBC has lost an important source of sustainability because in-person international intensive trainings are on hold for a while. And so that was a major source of their funding. And even though they've been creative about doing virtual intensive trainings, it's not a replacement for that funding source. So raising awareness that there are two ways that you can support the Center for Nonviolent Communication right now. One way is by buying as many copies of Jim's Pathways to Nonviolent Communication as speak to you. And I'll post a link into the chat right now.
I did that too, Rob. So.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Appreciate it, Jen.
Okay.
And second, you can consider becoming a monthly sponsor of CNBC, and you can choose a regular donation amount that you can contribute to the organization monthly. And Jen will post a link to the donation page. And so thanks for your continued support. And now we'll go into talking about observation. And before we do that, let me just make one request of everyone. I will be using the chat throughout the presentation to post things and to share things and to give instructions about activities that we're going to do. And so I'd encourage you to not just use the chat for conversing with each other as much as possible. That's one request. The second request is that if you have any technical needs connecting to audio or any questions about how to use Zoom, to message Jen directly. And so she's the technical support for today. The other thing is just a promise as we move forward. This will be highly experiential and interactive. I will be talking at the front end, but then there'll be opportunities for you to share for most of the session. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to spotlight myself. Let me spotlight myself. And let me share my screen. Let's see here. I'm not getting an opportunity to share a file. Why is that? Yeah, Jen, I'm not getting an opportunity to share a file here.
Try that now, Rob.
No, just the whiteboard.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. We'll get it
Let me
sorted in
just
just a
think here
second.
what I can.
Let me look at the permissions.
Yeah. So I just made everyone able to share a screen, but I'm going to unclick that since it did not work.
Yeah, when I go to share screen, it just says whiteboard, which isn't what I need. That's unfortunate.
So I can make you host, Rob, and because I'm able to share both my screens that are going on right now.
That's probably what's happening. Thank you.
Yeah. And then if you just want to make me co-host, that would help me host.
Will do. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you made Rob P the host.
Oh, that's not good. So Rob P, I hope you are awake.
Yeah, Rob P, if you could give me host permissions, please. You're now host of the meeting.
Yep. Okay, so I just need to think, how can I reclaim host, Rob?
I don't think you can.
Okay, I do have a host key, so let me see.
Okay.
If anybody knows that, unless
This
Rob P is
Jen,
there,
this
that
is
would be.
This is Wolfgang. So I think you have at the participant list something at the right bottom corner. At least I had that this morning. 3 dots when you click at participants, and then at the lower right-hand corner. And on these 3 dots, there's something like claim host. And then you need that 6-digit
Yeah.
code.
So I don't have those 3 dots. So this was a big, big oops. Okay, so we don't have
Sorry.
anybody.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It was my fault. I wonder.
I think you can re-access Jim's Zoom account.
I think I'm
And
gonna
if
need
you
to
do that,
Okay. Yeah, so Rob, if you want to talk for a couple minutes while I sign into Zoom with Jim's account is what I'm going to
do
do.
you have the access details, or should I do that?
I do have the access details. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and sorry everyone, and thank you.
No worries. So let me just talk a little bit about why observation is so important, and we'll get into how to cultivate observation and my experience with the matrix and how the matrix supports the cultivation of observation. But observation is next to presence in the Pathways to Spiritual Liberation matrix because it's about grounding in the present. It's about noticing what's happening now. And so all of our connection to life is through an awareness of what's actually happening. And what's actually happening is what's happening in my body, my sensations, my feelings. Being present to those bodily sensations, being receptive to them. Awareness of what's happening in my thoughts. All kinds of thoughts come up. Thoughts about what's happening right now. What does it mean to me? So we as humans have the capacity to explore the future, think about the past. How does this current experience relate to things that have happened to me in the past? We are meaning-making machines, and so thoughts about why is this happening now? And what are the motives of the other person? What's happening in my environment? What are the sounds and situations that are happening around me, the context for this particular event? All these things are happening at one point that we have access to. And what do we choose to notice? What do we choose to observe in that realm of sensations? So it's so important to be grounded in the here and now. And it's so helpful to distinguish between what's actually happening versus what am I making up about it. That's such a fundamental practice in nonviolent communication and other spiritual traditions. Because oftentimes what we find is that what we're responding to isn't necessarily what's happening. It's something we're telling ourselves a story about what's happening. And so it can be liberating and grounding to reconnect to what's actually happening right now and to notice and distinguish that from what we're making up about what's happening. And so there's a saying in many spiritual traditions that the worst things in my life never actually happened. The worst things in my life never actually happened. Now, what does that mean? It means that the worst things in my life were things that I ruminated about, I speculated about, I catastrophized about. Because this thing is happening right now, oh no, it means that this is what's going to happen in the future. Oh, I see I'm the host now. And so by grounding ourselves in what's really happening, we can distinguish and say, you know, those are thoughts. That's actually not happening right now.
Sorry to interrupt, Rob, but if you can hit record. Oh, it is recording. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Just one more thing, and then we'll go back to the presentation and the activities, is that it's also very connecting to be grounded in what's actually happening. Because when we're interacting with someone else, having a common understanding of, this is my experience of what's happening now. What's your experience? So another person's not going to necessarily have direct experience to what my thoughts are or what my feelings are. But we can start by grounding in, here's what I noticed about what just happened. What was your experience of that? And that can be a very connecting thing to come to an understanding, yeah, we both had that experience and we both had a common shared reality. Instead of starting with thoughts about judgments or criticisms or diagnoses that the other person doesn't have direct access to, where we can have a misunderstanding about that. Okay, let me share my screen now. Oh, it's the same. Okay, it's the same. I can't share. Yeah, I can't share a file. Oh, this is not great. Okay, well, we'll do the best.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know, I'm not an expert, but is your file open? Because sometimes if it's open on your computer, then it will show up on the screen when you try to share.
Oh, it's open. Yeah, yeah. And I have a lot of.
Then I have no idea.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Yeah, me too. So
Rob, this is Wolfgang again.
Maybe you can share the file to someone else, then the person can share the screen.
I think that would be, yeah, I appreciate the suggestion. And I think in the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll just speak to things and I'll send the file out later and we'll do the best we can. Yeah, I've never had this happen before, so I'm not sure what's going on. So let me just speak to what I was going to share, and we'll lose out on some of the visuals here. And so we'll focus on the activities. Okay, so let me start by sharing a little bit about why observation is so important. Let me give you a concrete example. The bulk of my experience is helping couples in romantic relationships, couples of all forms, use nonviolent communication to get more connection, intimacy, closeness in their relationship. And so let me post in two things into the chat window. And these are things that I hear in my practice. These are, real examples of what I've heard from couples. Same situation, different ways of talking about it. And we'll use this as an example. Okay, here's the first one. So in the chat window, you'll see the example. You can imagine someone walking into their house after being out for the day and their partner is laying on the couch and they say something like, "You are so lazy. I bet you did not get up from the couch all day. You don't even care about the state of our house. I guess I'll do it all myself. Now, your first experience of this statement that you see in the chat there may be that this is far-fetched, but couples talk to each other like this. And I'm sorry, I see a lot of chat back and forth in the chat window. If you are speaking to each other, if you could chat directly with each other, because some of the things I'll be sharing in the chat now will get lost. So you may think that this is a far-fetched example, but couples that are in front of me when I'm doing a session with them, this is the kind of ways that sometimes they speak to each other. And the natural reaction is that if I'm on the receiving end of this, that I'd be defensive, right? I would maybe shut down, stop listening, because it's painful to hear language like this. And let's just dissect it one at a time. So you are so lazy. That's a diagnosis. It's an evaluation of another person. I bet you did not get up from the couch all day. That's a speculation. That's, if I was out of the house, I would not have known what the person was up to, my partner was up to. You don't even care about the state of our house. That's the myth of motives, where I'm making an attribution to someone else about what's inside their head, which I don't have access to. And then I guess I'll do it all myself. That is assigning an intention to the other person that they don't even care to want to help me. So there's no observation in here at all, which is really painful. And really, all this are things that the person stating this are making up about the situation, not what actually happened. Now, in contrast to this, let me give you another concrete example. Same situation, different way of approaching it. So here you're seeing the chat window that. Walk into the house, you see that, you look around and you see maybe it looks the same way that it did when you left. And you say to your partner, I recall that you said that you'd tidy up the kitchen. Is that right? The kitchen looks the same to me as when I left this morning. Would you be willing to talk about how we manage the housework? Very different approach. Not only is there more words here and maybe more pausing to ask for some feedback, more interaction, engagement with the other person, not just speaking at them, but there's more observation. So starting with the observation of a recollection of something that happened. I recall that you said that you tidy up the kitchen today. Is that right? So observation are things that we see, hear, that we experience in our body, that we smell, that we taste, right? This is something that I remember that the other person said. And then checking in with the other person just to make sure their memory is the same. Is that right? So this is a very gentle way of saying, this is what I thought you said, an observation. The kitchen looks the same to me as when I left this morning. That again is an observation. I remember what it looked like this morning. It looks the same. And would you be willing to talk about how we manage the housework? In contrast to the last example where there was a poke to the other person, a hurtful poke that assigned to them some intention of not even caring to try to help. Now I'm ending on a clear and present request to engage the other person, which is a principle of nonviolent communication. So this one is filled with observation. And what's the advantage here? The advantage here is I'm speaking about my personal experience. I'm not speaking about the motives or the attributes of the other person. I'm checking with the other person and asking them, is that consistent with your experience? So it's a very grounding and way to connect with the other person and to create some shared reality. And it invites the other person to be part of the conversation, to say, is this your reality too? And that being said, you may also notice in these two examples that maybe my tone sounds a little bit different in the two. But the second example, I can even say with more of an upset tone, and it still contains the observation. Let's give that a try. I recall that you said you'd tidy up the kitchen. Isn't that right? The kitchen looks the same to me as when I left this morning. Would you be willing to talk about how we can manage this housework? So nonviolent communication and observation as a part of it doesn't always have to be calm, to be kind and direct. We can express our upset. We can let the other person know this is important to us by our tone of voice and our body language. We can be expressive. So that's often a misunderstanding. Oh, I'm seeing that Mickey is sharing her screen. Mickey? Mickey? Jen, I'm not sure.
So I am not co-host or host, but if you hit stop, you should be able to stop Mickey's screen sharing. You might need to do that.
Yeah, okay, that's what I did. Okay, not sure what happened there. So let me make
And do
you
you want to
co-host.
make me co-host? Well,
Yeah,
here, thank you, Rob.
sure. Okay, so hopefully this example makes it real. And in the context of a romantic relationship, these things happen all the time. So we now have an understanding of why observation is so important. Well, how do you cultivate this skill? Well, in Jim's book, Pathways to Nonviolent Communication, there's an outline of the 28 skills that are there. And what a wonderful thing that we're having this 28 hours to explore them. And pathways about how you can cultivate those skills or where you are in those skills, with observation being one of them. Now, to understand my experience of the Pathways to Liberation matrix that's in the Pathways to Nonviolent Communication book, Jim's book, let me start a few decades ago, which is I come to nonviolent communication through Buddhism. And I'm so glad that I did that, because coming to nonviolent communication through Buddhism fulfills some of the needs that I had in Buddhism. And Buddhism also set a very great foundation for me understanding and practicing nonviolent communication. So let me talk about that. That in Buddhism, there's quite a bit of focus on grounding and noticing. So there's a lot of practices in Buddhism that cultivate seeing clearly. That one of the foundational parts of Buddhism is really understanding what's going on and being alive and aware of what's going on. And Buddhism is really strong about a set of Buddhist meditation practices to get really good at noticing what's going on. And so more about that a little bit later in the presentation, because we're going to draw on that. But where I found some confusion with myself and others and some unmet needs in Buddhism was more specificity about what's called in Buddhism skillful speech, skillful action, and skillful livelihood in the Eightfold Path. Skillful speech, skillful action, skillful livelihood. And the encouragement in Buddhism, to my understanding, there's not one Buddhism, so let me be clear about that. This is the Buddhism of my understanding. There's lots of different traditions in the overall Buddhist spiritual tradition, is that once you get connected to what's happening right now and get connected to my inner wisdom and my inner compassion, choices become clear as to how to live in a compassionate way. There are some basic guidelines about not taking what isn't yours, refraining from killing anything, aligning your livelihood to your spiritual beliefs. But those are very general directives, and some of them are very basic ones, like not killing and not stealing. And so I wanted more, and I had a need for, well, what's more about living in a compassionate way? And discovering nonviolent communication really answered those questions for me. Here's a way that you actually do it. Here are specifics about how I show up in the world, how I interact with other people, how I understand where they're coming from and where I'm coming from in my choices and my actions. And it answered some of those questions. And then I had the question, well, okay, well, those are the things that you do in nonviolent communication. Well, how do I get good at them? How do I develop more skill to do those things, to be more compassionate in my interactions with other people? And that's where I was at an international intensive training with Jim Mansky and Jory Mansky, where they introduced me to the Pathways to Liberation. And those 28 skills really answer that question. As I looked through the 28 skills, I said to myself, these are the comprehensive list of the 28 skills that encompass those things. And this gives me a roadmap, a path to see where I am in those practices. Not in a judgmental way, not in a good or bad way, where this is right or wrong, I'm deficient in some way, but just as guideposts to say, where am I now? Where are the strengths of my skills that I can build on? And what do I focus on to build on these other skills? So the Pathways to Liberation was really the answer for that, coming out of that background. And so let's take a moment and then dive into the first of two activities that we're going to talk about. What I'd like to invite you to do is I'm going to paste in, and so this will be an opportunity to hear from all of you about your experience and your your perspective, I'm going to paste in one at a time a quote. And that quote is going to be a quote about some interaction between people. What I'd like to invite you to do is to give some feedback. Give some feedback about, if you were on the receiving end of that quote, how would it land with you most commonly? And also, what are some recommendations or proposals that you'd make about changing that sharing in a way to make it more observational? What are some of the challenge you would see in it? And what are some ways that you would improve it to where that communication would be more connected? Okay. Let me just pause here before we go into the activity, that we're talking about multiple layers of observation here, right? So the first layer of observation is noticing what's happening. The second layer of observation is distinguishing what's happening from my thoughts and evaluations and ruminations and speculations about it. The third layer of observation is then, what do I choose to communicate to this other person, right? So really 3 layers: noticing, discerning what's happening versus what am I making up about it, and then what do I choose to communicate. So here in this activity, we're going to be talking about all 3 of those layers, right? So let me go ahead and paste the first example, and then what I invite you to do is to raise your hand, and I will call on you as soon as I see you. And then you can unmute yourself. So here's the first one, and let me unspotlight myself. You are so generous. You're always thinking of me and my needs. I'm so lucky to have you as a friend. So let me go to gallery view and look around. And Jen, if you could help me here, let's see who has a hand up. How could you make this communication more observational? And how do you think it would land with the other person if you were on the receiving end of this? Anyone? You are so generous. You're always thinking of me and my needs. I am so lucky to have you as a friend. Oh, Susan in Egypt.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I noticed, although these words are kind of flattering, but it felt heavy with me. And I felt kind of like obliged somehow to fill in a role, or to be, to live up to these expectations, being generous, always thinking of their needs, and being that great friend. I don't know, it just, that's how it sat with me. Like, I don't know, maybe that's the first thing I noticed about this, exercise.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being brave to go first and raise your hand. I appreciate it. And let me just echo what you said and make sure I got it right, that you felt a heaviness to the words, almost like you were put upon, that there's an expectation that now you're the generous one and that you need to be generous. Is that right?
I muted myself. Yes,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah, I get that. And that's a common experience that let's check in with everybody in the group here, that this is the way at least in my culture in the US, this is the way many people talk to each other. Oh, you're so honest. I really appreciate that about you. Or you're such a generous and kind friend. And we think about this as kind language, but really we're labeling someone else and we're making an evaluation of them as good or bad. And so I wanted to start with something that we label as a positive sharing between people, not something where I'm upset. I'm actually needs met, and and the person wants to communicate this, and it falls flat. It really falls as a judgment of the other person, even though it's intended to be kind. And so, Susan, would you like to be brave and to take another go at this and make up a way to make it more observational and more connecting?
Sure. So,
Mhm.
so I'm going to make the sentences more observational.
Mhm.
Okay. Maybe I would say, I noticed that you took the time to do so and so for me, and that is a generous act. I appreciate it, and I think I don't know what the last sentence, how to, I'll just say. Lucky to have you as a friend.
You're doing great, Susan.
I would just say the same thing. I would just say I'm lucky to have you.
Okay. And yeah, so you translated into, what I love about what you shared is that you translated into a specific act that the person did. That's the observation. When you did this, here was the impact on me. And so just to give you the framework, and this is a framework that you'll use again and again. And this is workshop language, right? This is the framework, making it into natural language. So we'll play around with that. So the framework is, here's what I noticed. Here's the observation. Here's how it made me feel. Here's the underlying root cause of why I felt that way. Here's what was important to me about it. And then a clear and present request. So observation, feelings, needs, request. It doesn't have to be in that order necessarily, but it might have most of those components. So in this case, I noticed that when you did this for me, that I felt supported. I felt uplifted. I felt happy. And it's because, I really see you as an important support in my life. And how does it feel to hear me say that? Those are the different parts, right? So that's one way we could change it. But anchoring an acknowledgement, a gratitude in what the other person did. And one little part where we're just to be aware of, Susan, that you said, I noticed when you did this for me, that it was a generous act. So if you say, hey, it was, I noticed when you did this for me, that you were being generous, then that would be something to be careful about, because that would be an evaluation, that would be a judgment about them, right?
Yeah.
So just focusing on what they did and how it made you feel and why it was important to you. Yeah, great. All right. If everyone feels complete, let's go on to the next one. Oh, I'm seeing too that Denise in Melbourne is saying it depends on the tone. Yeah, tone and body language is really important. So let's keep an eye on that as we go forward. Good observation. Okay, here's the next one. We'll see if there's another brave soul who'd like to jump in for this one. Last night, you monopolized the conversation with our friends. You didn't ask me any questions. You did not invite me to join in. I felt excluded. You were so self-absorbed. Who'd like to take that one? That's a mouthful. That's a handful there. Oh, I see Ching Ching. Yeah. Hi, Ching Ching.
Rob, so I have to change it to be more observational, right?
Yeah, and make it more connecting to where the other person can hear you, to where it's more honest self-expression. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, last night I was waiting for sharing my experience, but most of the time I saw that you didn't ask me question, and you kind of monopolized the conversation, and I felt disconnected. And I love to share my idea. I love to connect with all of you. So it would be helpful for me if the next time I can share my idea to you and your friends. So it will be more intimate and to understand each other better.
Nicely done, Ching Ching. Yeah, so let me say it back to you to make sure I heard you the whole time. So I noticed last night that you didn't ask me any questions when we were with our friends, and you didn't invite me to join in. And I really felt frustrated because I wanted to be part of the conversation. And I think your request was, next time, would you be more mindful to invite me in? Did I get that right?
A little bit different. I said I felt disconnected, not frustrated.
Not frustrated? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So much for wrapping up.
And a couple of things about that, saying to the person they monopolize the conversation. What's often the case when you talk to your friends or colleagues or your romantic partner and you say you monopolize the conversation? Yeah, A Dobia.
Yes, I have a question about what you did with Susan. Can I?
Oh,
Or
going
can
back to
I
the previous one.
postpone it?
Would it be okay if we close this one out and then we'll go back? Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'll come back to you. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, since we're right in the middle of this one. So
Rob, I did notice in the chat, there's an example of last night. Last night I noticed that you were speaking 70% of the time.
yeah, let me, so oftentimes we think that observation is getting more numerical or more like into the data, and that sometimes can be helpful. But in this case, if I were to say to my partner, last night you monopolized the conversation, or last night you spoke 70% of the time, in helping lots of couples and in hearing this, and also in my own personal experience, the first thing the other person would say, no, I didn't. And then where are you stuck? Where are you stuck at that point? You monopolized the conversation. No, I didn't. So then you're in not shared reality, right? And then where do you go from there? And I've seen couples for hours and days. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. And to break out of this, really to go encourage one of them to say, let's go to honest self-expression. Honest self-expression is, what did you observe? What was your experience? How did it make you feel? How did it relate to your needs? What were your underlying needs? And do you have a request of your partner there, right? And you monopolized is not an observation. It's more of a feeling. It's more of a result of an upset or a frustration. It's more a result of an unmet need, right? Oh, Denise said about me not pointing at the other person. Do you want to take a stab at it, Denise? Because I think you're onto something there.
What do you want me to say?
Do you want to take a stab at how you might do that?
What I'm hearing first, I'm hearing where it was going is like you did this or you didn't do this, and you're saying that will maybe invite more a defense or argument. So yeah, and then you basically name it. It's like maybe whatever he did, how did I feel? How I feel. So it's really focusing on me and what I was experiencing. And I guess the words coming up is owning up my experience and allowing that disconnection of, yeah, it might not be your intention, but this is how I feel. And maybe that will also bring up where do we want to go? Like just assuming it's a loving relationship, then let's contribute to that togetherness, and where will we go? I'm trying to duck away from recreating your sentence.
Exactly. And the activity is not to recreate the sentence. So would it be okay if I ask you to pause there and I give some feedback? Yeah. I love what you did, because in this example, it may be hard to give an observation. And so you start with feelings, which is, and also I love that you made a connecting request at the beginning, which is, hey, this might be difficult for you to hear. I would like to share something with you. Is now a good time? Inviting the person in and saying, are they resourced right now? First of all, making sure the other person is resourced to hear the feedback. And then starting with your feelings. Last night I felt frustrated. I felt really left out. I really wanted to be part of the conversation. I didn't feel like part of the conversation. Would you be willing to explore that with me? And you're right, in a loving relationship, the other person, your partner, hearing that you're frustrated, that you didn't have your needs met in the activity with your friends, it might be a surprise to them. They might have been oblivious because they're just having fun and talking. And they're invited in to say, oh, I don't want that for you. Let's explore that. Let me understand more, as opposed to starting with here's what you did and here's why it didn't make me feel good. Yeah. Thank you, Denise. I see Gwandi's hand up. Gwandi?
It's Eric.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, I had this exact scenario before where I was with a group of friends, and like the girl I was dating at the time and my other friend were just like chatting all evening, and I couldn't even get a word in edgewise. And yeah, I felt like just totally left out and like awkward about it, And I tried to say to her, and I said exactly to her, like, hey, like kind of felt left out earlier, like, you know, and the response that I got to that was, well, you just didn't speak up. If you want to talk, you just got to speak up, and, you know, like, don't pause and wait because you're not going to get a chance. You just got to be more assertive. It's like, okay, like, you're just totally missing. Like, it's hard when, because even in saying, you know, I felt left out, that can be seen as an accusation of, you know, you blaming them for you not taking action yourself, you know. And the person's like, well, if you want to speak up, you speak up. You know? So it's that's just a tricky, slippery slope that I noticed.
Yeah,
Eric,
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's really pragmatic and practical, because in most of our daily lives, we're in real conversations with people who are not practicing nonviolent communication. You know, when we're in a practice group, or we're in with people in the community, it can be a different level of conversation. But with people who maybe don't have the practice of nonviolent communication, last night I felt left out. Oh, well, you need to speak up. They might go right to strategy, right? They might go right to fixing the problem. That's very common. And so what can we do to encourage them to stay with us and stay with our experience? Well, let me give you an example and see how it lands with you, Eric. So last night I felt left out. Well, you should speak up. Hey, I appreciate your feedback. And I realized that I wasn't clear in what I was asking for before we started this conversation. I really like for you to understand what it was like for me and not fix it. So could you say back to me what you understood it was like for me last night? Yeah. Just keep inviting them back into what was it like to be me? What was it like to be me? Because if they go right to fix it or to strategy, you hold their hand and bring them back into empathy.
Yeah, they just dismiss your feelings.
Exactly. Right. And then it's flipped, because you're making best efforts not to make a judgment of them, and they go to a judgment of you, which is you're just not assertive enough. Right. And then you're on the receiving end of a diminishing judgment, which is disconnecting and hurtful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Eric.
No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rob, there's a couple of things in the chat, just so you know. The first was about if it'd be good to say I was speaking 5% of the time. And
yeah, and it's difficult.
It's left out a thought. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to, those are both good ones. It's difficult to quantify, and you'll get into arguments with other people. It'll get into conflict about, no, you spoke more than 5%, right? So it's more about, sometimes it's hard to quantify or to make a clear observation. And they're starting with your needs. You know, hey, I wanted to share more last night, and I really longed for sharing more. I really longed for more connection with and more engagement in the conversation. That's the observation of what it's like to be me, and sharing that, as opposed to the observation of the experience. And left out is a thought. And so here, this is a great one. So we hear in nonviolent communication, the nonviolent communication police talking about faux feelings. And you know, Marshall talked about faux feelings, F-A-U-X, false feelings, right? Left out, disconnected, rejected. And I'm very lucky to have studied and have a mentor in Jim Mansky, who I love when he talks about how, yes, that's true. Those are faux feelings. You know, rejected is not a feeling, left out is not a feeling. But when we're trying to connect with someone and be empathetic to someone else, we know what they mean, right? So you do the translation in your head. So I felt left out. Okay, well, felt left out is about other people doing something to you, but what would it feel like to feel left out? It would feel sad. It would feel crummy. It would feel upsetting. It would feel frustrating. And you do the translation in your head, right? So one of the advanced practices of nonviolent communication is doing the translation of the other people's language. And so you're right that when we're talking to someone who maybe doesn't have the level of practice in nonviolent communication, they may say, I felt left out. Now, I see, Aid Debea, that your hand is up, and I know you had a question about before, so let's make sure we get to it before we go to the activity 2.
Yes. While you speaking about observation, is it for teaching purposes and practicing purposes, or in real life? For the example with Susan, if someone is trying to show his gratitude or being grateful to me and expressing some positive emotions toward me. And I see his need. Okay, is it enough to salute this moment and to bypass fixing the language? Or you are doing this for teaching and practicing purposes?
Good points. Yeah, so a couple things about what you said. So I'm hearing you say that if the language that we're speaking with someone else doesn't follow nonviolent communication, but it lands with me in a way that's connecting, and that's, so is that enough? Is that sufficient? And yes, the whole goal here is not right or wrong, good or bad. This is the only way to do this. This is the right way to do this. Instead, these are principles, pragmatic principles that work in real life that lead to more connection. So, in other words, if your colleague says to you, "You're such a generous person, I really appreciate that about you," and you in your mind do the translation of, they're probably talking about those two things that happened yesterday. I know what they're talking about, and that feels really good to me. And maybe you choose to respond to them and say, "Hey, when you say that you experienced me as generous, do you mean yesterday when I shared my lunch with you? Is that what you mean?" "Yeah, that's what I'm talking about." "Oh, that warms my heart," right? So if you can do that translation and there's a context there, then yeah. And this isn't about correcting someone else, or instead it's about having the skill to use these principles to maximize the probability of connecting with another person, of being honest and sharing with the other person and having them know what it's like to be me, and to be able to do the translation of what they're saying into observations, feelings, needs, and requests. Because in the real world interactions, people may not come to us with observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And we need to check in with them. "Do you mean this or this? Here's my understanding. Is that what you mean?" Those sorts of things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. So now we have time for activity 2, which is the big question is, well, how do we practice and how do we cultivate more opportunities for observation? So in the next 10 minutes, we're going to lean on and borrow from a rich tradition of Buddhist meditation, right? So for those of you who have experience with Buddhist meditation, this might be something that's very near and dear to your heart. But in nonviolent communication, we talk about the need to be present and to observe, but it's less common that we talk about, well, how do you do that? In the Buddhist tradition, the practice happens before you get into the conversation. The practice happens on a daily basis as a way to prepare for those moments. And it happens through meditation. And so what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes is walk you through. So I invite you to get comfortable, to do whatever you need to do to minimize any potential for distraction. And we're going to go through a series of Buddhist meditation practices that will help this challenge of observing, because it's really not easy. And so attention awareness is a skill that you can practice and develop, just like going to the gym and doing lifting weights. Buddhist meditation will allow you to have more choice over where you place your attention. It will allow you to have more awareness about where your attention is in the moment. It will allow you to have more facility in switching between where you place your attention. And so that's what we're going to be doing right now. Okay. So I'd invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. You can leave your eyes open if not. And invite you to attend to your breath first. And by attending to your breath in a Buddhist meditation approach, it's placing your awareness on the bodily sensations of the rising and the falling of your belly. The bodily sensations, the felt experience of the rising and falling of your belly. And we're just going to try to keep them there for a few minutes. And what you'll notice undoubtedly is that your awareness will shift to something else. It'll shift to a thought. This is boring. This is stupid. Why am I doing this? It'll shift to an experience of birds chirping or another noise in your environment. When you notice that your attention has shifted, celebrate that you've noticed it and bring your attention back to the felt sense of the rising and falling of your belly. Let's see how we do. Not trying to change anything about our breath, not trying to control it, just being with the felt sense of the rising and falling of my body, of my belly. Next, let's practice moving our attention from the rising and falling of our belly to another part of our body. So let's bring our attention to the palms of our hands. What does it feel like in the palms of our hands? Rest your awareness there. When you notice your awareness has shifted to something else, a thought, some other part of my body, your environment, celebrate noticing the shift and rest it back again on the sensations in the palms of your hands. The invitation is to focus on the felt sense of the sensations. If names come up, pain, pleasure, pressure, let the names go and just be with the felt sense. You may notice an abundance of sensations in your hands that you weren't aware of before. You may have a difficulty resting your awareness on the sensations of your palms of your hands. If so, just be patient and continue to try if it feels comfortable for you. Let's shift our attention once more to the soles of our feet. The felt sense of what it feels like in the sensation, sensory apparatus, the sensory nerves in our feet, the soles of our feet. If you're lying down, if you're sitting on a chair, if you're standing up, what does it feel like to have feet and to have them on the ground or in the air? And lastly, we're going to change our focus of attention to, now let's put our focus of attention on our thoughts. Let's just watch our thoughts as they come and go. Where do thoughts come from? Who knows? They come, and when a thought arises, just pay attention to it and then let the thought go and just wait for the next one to arise. Without getting attached to the thought or without letting it take you to the next thought, just see the thought and let it go and wait. If you notice that you get carried away in a stream of thoughts, celebrate the noticing and then just let the thoughts go and come back to watching for the next thought to arise. Nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to plan, no objective, just watching and see what arises. And before we conclude this activity, we're going to shift our attention to the rising and falling of our belly for 3 breaths. And they'll invite you to return your attention to the main meeting room and to open your eyes if they're closed. So breath 1, breath 2, and breath 3. So now I invite you back into the room with us. And we're at the close of our time here together. So just to close out that those meditation practices, those are practices that you can do on your own, that you can have support from a meditation teacher, that placing your awareness where you want it to place and for a longer period of time. You may start out with 5 minutes, then 10 minutes and 15 minutes, starting with the anchor of your body. Your body is always in the present, right? Your mind can be in the past and the future. Your body is always in the present. Start with the anchor of your body. Explore a body scan, the sensations of the body. Watch your thoughts to see what the patterns are of your thoughts and to get good at noticing what you're thinking. And going back and forth, noticing this distinction between the feelings in my body, the sensations in my environment, and my thoughts. And just switching back and forth and getting really good at being able to place your attention where you want to place it. Starting out with doing this in a quiet place when you're alone in a quiet environment. But then after doing this on a daily basis for weeks or months, you'll be able to do this in a football stadium or in a crowded marketplace. It just takes practice. And you'll notice after weeks or months of daily practice, a difference in how your facility of moving your attention and noticing in conversation interactions with other people. So with that, I want to celebrate, and I'm feeling really joyous and grateful of having this opportunity to be with you. I'm feeling really appreciative of all the input and willingness to do these activities with me. And so in closing and handing off to the next presentation, let me just let you know that after this session concludes, after this event concludes, after these 28 sessions conclude, you will receive a link with the recordings. So if you missed anything or if you want to watch it again, you will get a link for the recordings. If you haven't already registered, if you got here some other way, Jen will post a link to the registration. So please register so you get the email with the recordings. And if you're leaving the event now, please consider these following requests. Fulfilling these requests will support CNBC in continuing our mission to make nonviolent communication accessible through their website and their network of trainers. First, you can buy as many copies of Jim's book as you feel joyful doing, as you have a need for. And Jim will post a link to where you can buy the book. All the proceeds go to the Center for Nonviolent Communication from Jim and from Puddle Dancer, they'll all go to CMVC. And second, please consider being a monthly sponsor of CMVC, and Jim will post a link to where you can sign up to do a regular monthly contribution to CMVC. So thank you all. And next up, I'm going to be transitioning over to Mickey Amrita, and she'll be talking about honest self-expression. So thank you, Mickey. Thanks, Jen, for your support.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry for the little glitches. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.